Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I did not write it myself, just as so that you know. So my name is Paul Anders Opdal, and I'm an associate professor of education, or the philosophy of education, at the University of Tromsø in Norway. And you can see a picture of my hometown from May, probably, because the midnight sun is out. So in my town, in the summer, the sun shining all the time, whereas in the winter, the sun is gone for 2 months. So it's a town of extremes. It's actually a city. So I've been interested in metaphors for a long time, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today: metaphors in education. So I have a claim, and I have 2 questions. And the claim is that metaphors are everywhere in education. It's really, really hard, I think, to fathom or understand education without taking metaphors into account. And so the question is, why? Why is it like this in education? And is this a happy state of affairs? Is it something we should try to fix, or is it rather in alignment with the nature of the case? Yes, so this is a grand claim, and I need to demonstrate it. And I demonstrate it like this. So these are metaphors from 4 educational papers, just 4. Admittedly, the papers have education and metaphor in their titles. So I'm not claiming this to be representative. I'm just claiming that this is actually the state of affairs. And I'm particularly interested in the following 3 metaphors: construction, transmission, and growth. It has been argued that these are metaphors that orient fundamental educational paradigms. A German educationalist called Jürgen Oelkers makes this claim. And of course, construction goes well together with the constructivist learning theory. Growth, of course, goes together with Dewey, and transmission goes with traditional pedagogy, which has a bad rap. Maybe not deserved. We could discuss that. So I'm not claiming that this is representative of education. I'm not saying that I go from a sample, this sample, to the universe of education. I'm rather claiming that I'm reminding you what you already know. So maybe we don't think about this a lot, but I think it's like a worthwhile thought to make that this is actually, in my opinion, the case. So I'm trying to assemble some reminders of what we already know. Yes. So what is a metaphor? According to the Oxford English Dictionary, it is a figure of speech in which a descriptive word is transferred to an object or action different from, but analogous to, that to which it is literally applicable. So, for example, eating an orange is having the sun in one's mouth. So here the term sun is transferred from astrology to orange. But how is this possible? How can I say that eating an orange is having the sun in my mouth and you understand this? John Searle asked this question. I think it's a very good question. How is this possible? To say something other than you mean and be understood. How do we do it? There are, of course, different views on metaphor. So, for example, one view is that the metaphor is a substitution. Another view is that the metaphor is a comparison. And the third view, which I'm going to just presume or assume maybe. I'm not going to defend it. I do that in the paper. But here I'm just going to suggest it. So metaphor is an interaction. And what does that mean? And this view comes from an English linguist called Ramsey over an English or maybe American philosopher, I'm not sure, called Max Black. And the claim is that a metaphor is a borrowing between intercourses of thought. Two ideas cooperate to produce an inclusive meaning. And when you understand the metaphor, you're being forced to connect these two ideas. That is what the understanding of metaphor is. So, for example, when I say sun, I evoke in you a system of associated commonplaces. So you start to think about eating an orange when it's fresh, it's juicy, it's healthy. It has all these connotations or these associations that you make. And this is understanding the metaphor. And of course, some of you have some associations, and some of you have others, which explains why a metaphor is partly at least dependent upon who understands it. So we sort of, it triggers different associations in each of us. And this system is not sharply delineated, but it is sufficiently definite to admit of enumeration. If not, we couldn't understand the same. So there must be some limit to what you could understand. All right, so far so good, I think, I hope. So for example, when I say eating an orange is having the sun in one's mouth, I'm evoking in you all the ideas about the sun being vital, healthy, fresh, and you understand eating an orange is having the sun in one's mouth relating to this system, or the background of this system. Donald Schoen calls this generative metaphors. And the idea is that a generative metaphor provides you with a new perspective or a new frame of understanding. So just to contrast the sun, I mean, if the system was associated with commonplaces to eating an orange is the sun, then you can maybe say that eating an ice cream is to swallow the moon. That could be possible. Not saying that eating an ice cream is walking along, because that's a different system of associated commonplaces. All right. So this is just presenting the lens I'm trying to understand educational metaphors through. Metaphor as interaction. And then the attempt is to apply it to education, to the three metaphors that we had in the beginning: construction, transmission, and growth. So let's see how that fares. So the metaphor is learning is construction. The interaction of learning and the commonplaces associated to construction is what makes the metaphor. So what are the commonplaces connected to construction? Yeah, there are builders, foremen, construction site, scaffolds. For students, teachers, classrooms, and didactics. So we start understanding the world in this, or a piece of the world, in this instance, learning, in light of the metaphor, in this instance, construction. Transmission. Teaching is transmission. The interaction of teaching and the commonplaces associated with transmission. So we have messages, senders, receivers, media, interference for content, teachers, students, lecture, etc., etc. So we start understanding a part of the world, in this instance, teaching in light of the method, in this instance, transmission. Growth. Education is growth. So the idea is that the commonplaces associated to growth interacts with our idea of education. So what are the commonplaces? It's seeds, soils, sun, rain, gardener, weeding. For students, background factors, learning environment, teachers, didactics. All right, I'm not sure this is persuasive. I hope it is. But the idea is that there are so many metaphors in education that it is noticed. And so the question is, how are we to try to understand that fact? And is it a happy state of affairs? So I'll try to demonstrate that as you go through 3 of these metaphors, this seems probable. This is indicative, is the idea. Yeah, so we start understanding the world, in this instance, education, in light of the metaphor, growth. So why this prevalence of metaphor? You could argue it's because education is a young science. Then you will have a problem distinguishing education from educational science, because education, of course, is not young, but educational science is. And it's possible to argue that young sciences needs imprecise terms to sort of get on the way. You could also argue that it is because education is an interdisciplinary entity, which makes precise conceptualizations difficult. And you could argue that education is weak discipline. It's not rigorous. So these are our suggestions as to why this is the case. If you agree that it is, which I think you should, given my demonstration. Is this a happy state of affairs? Not, I think, if the aim is precision. I think it's very hard to do serious work in education because the concepts we keep are very often metaphors, which evokes the systems of associated commonplaces different almost on an individual level, or at least in a school level. So different schools keep their own method, and they don't understand the other ones. On the other hand, is it possible to talk about teaching, learning, and growth without using metaphor? And of course, growth is a metaphor. And I think you could argue that teaching used to be a metaphor. It's just now a dead metaphor. If it is not possible, then you could argue, and this is sort of the raisin in the hot dog, that conceptual formation in education really is tracing the associated commonplaces related to a generative metaphor. So it's not really, it's not conceptual formation in an ordinary sense. So it's rather tracing a thread that's already there. There's also a second question that's interesting, if it is the case that it's impossible to talk about this without metaphor. It is, how different are the 3 metaphors? Transmission and construction. Do they really express the same? And is it possible to use that as a guiding light as towards saying something that is more precise or rigorous? I'm not an advocate of rigor per se, but I think it is a problem in educational science that we so often talk cross purposes. And how are we to negotiate that fact? So you have different schools, of course, and they don't talk together. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for the engaging and,